What is the New Age religion? Is that dealing with the environment and all? Do you know, is the New World religion that they're trying to put on us?
Oh, what about the environment, its relationship to the New Age and the New World religion? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, they're using the environment to justify all sorts of increased government control. These people really have a worship of Mother Earth. They've substituted a worship of the God of the heavens for the earth. And it's paganism, and it's this old idea that we are all one. You are part of me, I'm part of you, you're part of the floor, I'm part of the ceiling, we're part of the trees and the flowers and the animals, and it's this pagan concept that has gripped the minds of so many people. Anything to draw people away from the truth that is recorded in the Holy Scriptures. Now, you have to understand that the environmental movement is largely being funded by the great foundations, the Lawrence Rockefeller Foundation. You go into the background of the funding of the environmental movement, and it comes right out of our great corporations. And why are even many of the corporations that are being impacted by the environmental movement funding it? Because they're not as interested in profit as they are in increasing the power of government over the lives of the people. And of course, the whole environmental movement then gets into sustainable development. Key phrase. What it really means is we got to kill off a lot of people so that we don't use up so many of the natural resources. And that is the major motive behind the genocide that is going on in the world today. And if you haven't got a copy of my little monograph on population control, we can either give you one or you can send it and we'll send it to you. But it's vitally important that people get that, understand that there is genocide going on throughout the world today, and it all ties into the environmental movement, the outlawing of DDT. DDT was not outlawed because it was entering the food chain, because it was killing people. It was outlawed because it was saving lives, and we give you the documentation on that. Alexander King from the Club of Rome talked about the tragedy that DDT was saving so many lives in Guyana. And Worthing, I think that's his name, actually had talked about how his major objection to DDT was because it was keeping people from dying. There is a Malthusian philosophy out there that ties into this whole thing. That manifests a hatred of humanity because humanity is God's highest creation.
Okay, thank you.
The microphone, please.
Don't be bashful. Just go back and pick up the mic there.
So the ultimate executive behind all of this is the bankers?
No, it's not the bankers. It's all Luciferian. I mean, the Luciferians are working with the banker. The bankers are energized by Luciferian forces, by Luciferian spirits. It's not the bankers, it's all of them. Maybe I should explain to you that Monsieur Perot finally decided that all 12 of the suspects had killed them. They had all killed him. And, of course, that was the secret of the murder on the Orient Express, and that's the secret of the problem we pointed out tonight. They are all involved, but the common denominator is Luciferianism.
They're energized by Luciferianism, but they are human beings acting as agents of this. Who are the human beings? Aren't they all bankers or members of the aristocracy?
No. They are at every level of our society. And, of course, you can get the demonic roots of globalism. You can get James Wardner's Unholy Alliances. You can get Paul Fisher's excellent book, Behind the Lodge Door. You can get Dennis Cuddy's book, The New World, New Age Order. But you'll find the membership list of the Council on Foreign Relations. You can get that by simply writing to 58 East 68th Street, New York City, New York. Get the CFR membership. You can write to the Trilateral Commission. We'll be glad to give you the name. You can get the names of those people. But this is a massive movement with literally millions of people who are energized by the dark side.
Yes, sir. You were talking about a secret club or a secret party. What's the exact name of that?
It never had a name. It was originally, the front organization was called the Round Table in England.
In England.
In England. And when it came to America,
the
front for the front was the Council on Foreign Relations. According to Professor Quigley and according to certainly all of the evidence that we can find, the Council on Foreign Relations grew directly out of the meetings between Lord Milner's men
Around
and the
19
inquiry in Paris back in 1919. And the offshoot of that was the formation of the Royal Institutes in every major Commonwealth nation, and in America, the Council on Foreign Relations, which was, according to Professor Quigley, a front group for J.P. Morgan and the Small American Roundtable Group.
And it started about 1914, the League of Nations, or what?
Well, the League of Nations started about 1919, 1920.
After the First World War.
After the First World War. The First World War was fought to justify the League of Nations, and when the League of Nations failed, then, of course...
The First World War was about...
The League of Nations, yes.
Unbelievable.
Well, if you'd like to document
Is
that...
unbelievable?
Well, I don't mind if you question that. I'd suggest you get my interview with Norman
No,
Dodd.
I'm not doubting that. It's just amazing.
Well,
Unbelievable is amazing.
Well, we have, fortunately, an interview I did back in 1980 with Norman Dodd. Now, Norman Dodd was the Director of Research for the Reese Committee, which was commissioned by the 83rd Congress to investigate the great tax-exempt foundations. And in the course of the investigation, one of his research assistants, Miss Catherine Casey, had the opportunity of going through the early records of the Carnegie Endowment for...
What year was this?
This was, well, she was going through this in 1953 or 54.
This is way after.
But the records she was going through were 1908 and 1909, before the Carnegie Endowment was even incorporated. And he tells the story, it's on the tape, and she found that the members of the board were actually talking about how can we change the world, what's the best way to change the world, and they decided that war was the best way to change the world. And when they decided on that, they said, well, how can we get America into a war? That's what he told me in 1980.
They sat at the round table and said, how can we have some more?
Well, it wasn't the round table. This was the Carnegie Endowment.
In England?
No, in America.
In America.
Right.
All right, thanks a lot for your time.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Hi.
sir.
What I would like you to do is, I've got a son here that's just starting school, and I'd like you to address the issue of what should be the motivation and the goals of young Christian kids starting off on the career path.
To love the Lord, to know God's Word, that's the most important thing that you can give to your children, because we are headed for very, very bad times. I'm going to have to ask somebody to give me another little glass of water before my voice gives out. But really, you need reading, writing, and arithmetic, phonics. But the most important thing is traditional history. The most important thing really is to learn the fear of the Lord. Freedom does not come from doing whatever you want to. Freedom comes from doing what God tells us to do and following the Ten Commandments. There is no such thing as freedom if there's not restraint. Bring your child up in the ways of the Lord, and that's what we're called to do, and that's the best advice I can give you, sir. And I can tell you that looking back on my life, I'm a little older than you are, but I've got three kids, and all of them love the Lord. None of them are doctors, none of them are professional people, but I think maybe that's far more important than all the education I could have given them.
Dr. Monteith, I know you've interviewed Malachi Martin.
Yes.
And what's your opinion of him and his writings? And the second question is, do you know what's happened to Linda Thompson? I know you had some exposure to her, too. Thanks.
All right, I don't know what's happened to Linda Thompson. Haven't heard from her in a long time. Malachi Martin is one of the most fascinating people around today. I think he's right on as far as his description of what's going on in the Catholic Church. In other words, the Catholic Church has been infiltrated, but the Protestant Church has been infiltrated too. But the primary drive of the Masonic movement was always to destroy first the Catholic Church and then Christianity altogether. And I think that what Malachi Martin says about the Masonic influence, about the satanic rituals are true. And I take that not only because he has said it, but Pope Paul VI, before his early demise, talked about the satanic smoke over the Vatican, and recently an exorcist, he's an archbishop from Africa, a black Catholic, has spoken about the demonic and satanic influence within the Vatican itself. So I don't think there's any question at all. He's right on. And of course, this idea that the Pope wants to lead this whole move towards world government. would suggest that perhaps his allegiance is not to the God of the heavens, but to a political agenda. And I think this is rather frightening. I think we are indebted to Malachi Martin for what he's written.